This video is a little personal, but I hope you stick with it. I started college in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic in the summer of 2020. It was a time in my life where I'd felt I had nowhere and no one to look to for support or guidance. I ended my senior year of high school unsatisfied and without closure, and I never got to see some of the people I should have said goodbye to. Right before I went to college, I started playing a game I've always heard about, but never really got to play, Getting Over It. It's a simple game about a man in a cauldron using a sledgehammer to climb a mountain. The game is considered by some as a rage game, a game where content creators get overly mad at it for the sake of creating entertaining content. I wouldn't blame you if that's how you first heard about Getting Over It. It's how I found out too. Markiplier throwing a chair across the room is really entertaining. But Getting Over It is a little more than that, at least to me. Around this time, I started eating a lot, gaining more weight, which I didn't really notice. The scariest part about depression is the beginning, when you don't notice it. You think everything around you is getting worse, and you aren't doing enough for yourself, and suddenly you have a realization that you are not who you want to be, and you don't know how to change it. Getting over it is, it's frustrating. It's kind of the point of the game. I've gotten plenty mad at the game when I started playing it, and it still frustrates me to this day. There's no other game that I've played where you swing a sledgehammer around trying to climb a mountain, but it's a unique task that I found intriguing, so I started going up. Going to college was already a stressful idea, something that I spent the last half of my high school years worrying about, but adding on to the stress of the pandemic made me never want to get out of bed. If it wasn't for my family, who would make sure I'm okay every day, I don't know where I would be today. Without them, I never would have made my move into my dorm to live on my own for the first time. Bennett Foddy, I think, is a good game designer. He understands how mechanics can be manipulated by a player to encourage thinking outside of the box, while also designing areas to fit with these new ideas. My biggest problem with the man himself is the narration in the game, which I always felt, even when I first started playing, was unneeded. His lectures on the state of society and the nature of creating felt meaningless, and his annoying slam poetry style and comments when he fell made me eventually turn his narration off. Living alone for the first time is a unique experience. You're given the freedom to decide your own schedule and make sure you're taking care of yourself. It was a breath of fresh air after living 18 years with the same people. I lived alone in my own personal room in my college dorm. I was too nervous I would annoy a roommate if I had one. It's a massive amount of responsibility, but at the time it's really what I needed. Getting over it is tiring. Partially because of the mental pain from losing your progress repeatedly, but also from the physical moving of the mouse, which requires long, circular swings that require your entire arm to move. I'm not a physically fit person, even on my best days, so playing this game for long periods of time made my hand and wrist hurt. Like, it was that bad for me. When was the last time a video game gave you physical pain from its central mechanic? And why, even despite all this, do I still want to climb this damn mountain? I started doing things I couldn't do again. Eating healthy and trying new foods was something to look forward to. Walking around my college campus for the first time on a sunny day is one of the greatest experiences of my life. I went to my classes with a renewed need for success, and even though the world was still crazy and I could only go outside with a mask, I felt like I was free to do anything I wanted. The physicality of Getting Over It was perhaps the reason why I wanted to see this task to the end. The physical hits of the hammer and the strength of lifting yourself over impossibly stacked obstacles meant success was sweet and failure only temporary. I found myself no longer getting discouraged from failure, instead found faster ways to proceed through the game. I was improving, even if it was just little by little. 2 weeks after classes began, several more COVID cases hit my college, and we were forced to return to our dorms. As a journalism and film major, our classes didn't technically require in-person teaching, but especially as a film major, being remote could never replicate an in-person experience. I would sit in my room, I would sit in Zoom calls trying to soak up information from lectures, but instead I spent my time nervous about stuff that didn't really matter, like my appearance on a webcam. The higher you climb in getting over it, the more the game demands out of you. Sometimes you can only guess what is up ahead or how to proceed forward. The possibility of failure is a creeping thought, and it makes sections which require quick climbing to become dangerous pitfalls. Minor failures that were temporary annoyances before would turn to extreme moments of utter sadness, and a particular section with snow would make me close the game out of frustration and not knowing how to conquer it. After 2 more weeks of remote classes, I decided to leave my college campus to return home to finish my classes completely remotely. I realized how much money I was potentially wasting staying on campus for the sole reason to stay in my dorm when I could save some money by returning home. It was a choice that I had to make. I would be stupid not to take it. But returning home to my room, losing my freedom again, only put me into a deeper spiral. It was when I returned to my hometown when I decided to reopen Getting Over It. I didn't know how long I would play, or even if I thought I could beat it that night. All I knew was that I needed to conquer this mountain. I would succeed and smile. I would then fall, where I would squint my eyes and look away from my monitor. Just really, really frustrated. But that night I would always return to the mouse, always return to the computer, and always return to the game. No matter how frustrated I was, I would always return. I chipped away at this mountain in front of me, gritting my teeth through public domain music and quips from Foddy, just to find myself on a massive ice mountain, listening to what he had to say.
Have you thought about who you are in this? Are you the man in the pot, Diogenes? Are you his hand? Are you the top of his hammer? I think not. Where your hand moves, the hammer may not follow, nor the man, nor the man's hand. In this you're his will, his intent, the embodied resolve in his uphill ascent.
His speech about the mechanics of the game representing the will of the player meant something to me. I would not stop until this mountain was conquered. I did not care about my hand and wrist in pain. I just had to see this to the end. I climbed and I swung this hammer, suddenly a master of its momentum and reach. I found myself launched into the sky. As I sailed through the air past the rocks around me, I could feel that this task would come to a close. The hard, gritty path to the top was now a fluid river of low gravity. Until one final launch.
Oh no.
And then the stars grew bright, and the credits rolled. Not only had I beaten this mountain, but I had sailed past it and found new heights, which I never could have realized. At that moment, I could only sob. Perhaps Getting Over It is simply a game about falling off a mountain hundreds of times before I break my mouse. But to me in that moment, it represented something about life that I felt I'd forgotten. The work that I did and the time I spent was filled with pitfalls and failure, rage and sadness. But in the end, when the only thing left for me to see was the stars, I was filled with a wave of happiness. I was not useless. The only thing that can get you back up is your own will and spirit, and that's what human strength is to me. Today, a little over 3 years since I first beat getting over it, I've since returned to a dorm in college and plan to graduate by the end of this year. I'm doing pretty good. I still feel the same anxiety about my future that I did back then. I recognize that this path is filled with my past regrets and some that I still won't be able to come to terms with. But I still walk forward, because if I fail, I'll only remain at the bottom. But even if I take a single step forward, I might one day have a chance to see the stars.
I'm going down this road.